Hi, my name's McLean, and I'm going to be talking about what a small group is, the functions of a small group, and why someone might join a small group. Thousands of years ago, humans only interacted with a couple dozen people their entire lives. Today, it's very different, but we still tend to stick with small groups. A small group is a formation of people that come together in order to complete a task. Small groups consist of at least 3 people and no more than 15 or 20. Small groups are also interdependent. This means that when something happens to one person, it affects everyone else in the group as well. Small groups are also cohesive. This means that all members are working together to reach a common goal. Small groups enforce norms and rules. This determines how a group will interact and function. The rules are officially stated and everyone follows these. The norms are never officially stated, but everyone understands these and abides by them. All members of small groups have individual roles. They use these roles to work together towards a small group, which it helps the effectiveness and reaches it quicker. There are formal and informal roles. The formal roles are officially given to each member, and the informal roles are never officially given, but it's when someone begins to assume a behavior that is expected of them by the other members. Small groups have their own identities. The group takes on an identity of their own to show who is and isn't part of a group. They can do this through secret handshakes, uniforms, or passwords. Small groups also have distinctive communication practices. Communication is necessary within the group in order to achieve a common goal and to share ideas. Communication is also necessary in order for the group members to make decisions. There are two small group structures, the circle and the wheel structure. The circle structure is when one member is connected to two other members, and they bounce ideas off of those two members and consult with them. An example of this would be co-authors of a research paper. They would pass down the paper and add on as it goes, and they would consult with the two members they are connected to. The second structure is the wheel structure. This is when the group has one member it has a leader that all members go to for assistance. This is used when the group has one member who has more expertise than the other members. There are many functions of a small group. It started off as a way to help humans survive by providing protection. The more people that a group had meant the more resources and the higher likelihood of surviving. But nowadays, we use small groups in order to focus on tasks and evaluate and advise. This allows the sharing of ideas and opinions in order to influence other members. Someone also may join a group because they don't want to be the main decision maker and they would rather be given a role. Other functions of a small group include creating art and ideas by putting their minds together, providing service and support, promoting social networking, competing, and helping us learn. There are many reasons someone may join a small group. One is the need for belonging. Humans are very social, and so that this means we really want to be part of a group. They also may join for protection. An example now that we would use it for protection would be labor unions. The labor unions come together with efforts and resources in order to ensure that the members have pay rises and health benefits. This ensures that the members have a stable and dependable life. Another reason someone may join is to improve the effectiveness. By sharing individual tasks, it helps them reach the common goal quicker and more effectively. Someone may also join because they feel the pressure to join. There are 5 steps of joining a group. The first is the antecedent. This is when someone would develop the beliefs, attitudes, and expectations of a group. The second is the anticipatory. This is when they make the decision to join the group. The third is the encounter stage. This is when the group actually first meets. The fourth stage is the assimilation stage. This is when the group makes the decision to accept a culture and to acquire their own identity. The fifth stage is the exit stage. This is when someone may decide to leave the group. Overall, small groups are an effective and easy technique that humans have used for thousands of years in order to reach common goals and to connect with others. We will now examine the pros and cons of small group communication.
My name is Lynn Mizer, and I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of small group communication. Small group communication happens when there are 3 or more members of a group working together to achieve the same goal or task. Small groups communicate through an interpersonal exchange process of information, feelings, and active listening in both small types of groups, which are primary and secondary groups. Advantages of small group communication would be that it provides more resources in order to be productive. Some resources are tangible, such as money, space, materials, and equipment. Some resources are intangible, such as time, information, talent, and expertise. When we do group work, we gain access to others' resources. For example, if we aren't good at one task, another member may do well at that task and excel in it. Small groups help us to experience synergy. Synergy is when a collaboration produces more than the sum of its. In other words, you'll accomplish more by working together than what you could individually. Small groups expose us to more diversity and creativity. 2 heads are better than 1. Small groups help with having more input and opinions, so we are able to make better and more informed decisions than what we could on our own. It opens new ideas that we may not have prior considered. Small groups expose us to different ways of thinking than our own because they have their own ideas, experiences, insights, and values that influence choice. This is due to enhanced cultural understanding. Members differ in characteristics, life experiences, cultures, and attitudes. Small groups give us greater member satisfaction. Some social benefits of small groups are the opportunity to make friends, socialize, receive peer support, and feel part of a unified, successful group or team. The more opportunities group members have to communicate with one another, the more satisfied group members will feel. Some challenges of a small group is groups require sacrifices. Small groups can require sacrifices to benefit the group. For example, you may take time away from your family in order to achieve the group goal. You may have to do more work than others to make sure work gets completed by its deadlines. Some members may participate in social loafing. Social loafing means they contribute less to the group than others. Some ways to avoid social loafing would be naming names, which can reduce social loafing by up to 29% if members' tasks are known to the entire group. Be specific about goals. Social loafing happens when each person knows and understands their assigned task. Make consequences clear. People are less likely to engage in social loafing if they understand how individual behaviors contribute to the group's goal. Small groups may experience conflict. When decisions being made and 2 or more members of the group think that their goals are incompatible and their resources are limited. What matters is how the group manages conflicts when they arise. It can go 2 ways, either constructive or deconstructive. Deconstructive leads to resentment. Constructive will lead to better and more informed decisions for the group as a whole. Small groups can be difficult to coordinate. It may be hard to find dates and times that work for everybody in a small group. The larger the group gets, the harder this also gets. It can be difficult to communicate effectively in larger groups, which is easier to do in smaller groups. Electronic communication can help this, such as calendars and scheduling apps, to better manage time. Belonging to a group can be positive and rewarding if all members are aware of challenges and are able to meet the group's communication productively. And now we're going to switch to talking about how groups make decisions.
My name is Maneesh and I'll be discussing how groups make significant decisions. When a group is making a decision, it's important to know what options they have and how they'll pick. There are many ways to generate ideas for a decision. Brainstorming is a very popular technique, which involves any group member suggesting any idea they can think of. Together, the group lists all of the suggestions, then they pick one from that list. The theory behind brainstorming is that the freedom to suggest ideas may lead to group members generating unique or unorthodox ideas. However, brainstorming can be very dull and ineffective in practice because members may be unwilling to suggest new ideas, or they might lack a good understanding of the issue. In order to improve the technique of brainstorming, Hal Gregerson of Harvard Business Review suggested that instead of generating ideas to solve a problem, brainstorm more questions, reframe the issue in new perspectives, and it might lead to better and more creative solutions. An alternative to brainstorming is the nominal group technique, where members generate ideas independently and silently. Then finally, they put them together in a list. The American Society for Quality suggests that this technique is good for members who are shy or for issues that are very controversial. Idea writing is a third option. Each member makes a list of ideas alone, and then each member leaves written comments on the ideas of other members. This allows for idea generation without having open discussions, which protects privacy. After generating ideas, there are many ways groups can make decisions. Unanimous consensus is the method where everyone must agree. This can be seen in situations like juries. However, there's a risk of false consensus, where not everyone agrees, but no one speaks out. Majority rule is the method where most members must agree. This is useful to ensure that most of a group supports a decision. Minority rule, on the other hand, is when a small subgroup makes the decision for the whole group. This is useful for small or non-controversial decisions. Expert opinion is when individuals with expertise in a topic make the decision for the group. This is based on the idea that those with expertise usually have better judgment on their topics. And finally, authority rule is when a leader makes a decision for the group. This is the fastest and simplest method, but it's problematic when there's no designated leader. Cultural differences can affect decision-making. According to a study by the Project Management Institute, when Swedish and German work groups were compared, their methods of decision-making were different. The Swedish preferred unanimous consensus. They took longer to make decisions, and they preferred an informal hierarchy. In contrast, the Germans preferred expert opinion. They took much less time to make decisions, and they used a rigid group hierarchy. Studies show that the cultural dimensions such as individualism, power distance, and time orientation all affect decision-making. Speaking of power, next we'll be discussing leadership and the use of power.
My name is Shivani Manikandan, and I'll be discussing the traits of leaders and power. Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln, and Martin Luther King Jr. What do all of these men have in common? They are all leaders. Leaders have both similarities and differences. They have similarities in their physical and psychosocial traits and often differ in the type of power they exercise. Leaders tend to have similar physical traits. Referring back to the opening example, one common trait of leaders is that they are male. Studies show stereotypes associated with being male, such as dominance and aggression, cause people to perceive males as better leaders. That being said, during high-risk situations, stereotypes associated with being female cause them to be perceived as better leaders. According to the Harvard Business Review, this is known as a glass cliff theory, and it comes with some consequences. Being a leader during tough times causes female leaders to have a higher probability of failing. And if and when female leaders fail, it further perpetuates the notion that men are more favorable leaders. Leaders also tend to be good-looking. Studies have shown that leaders tend to have a masculine face with a wide jaw and small eyes. Due to the stereotype that men are more powerful and dominant than women, masculine faces are associated with better leaders. One final common factor in leaders is that they are tall. In Western cultures, height is associated with dominance, power, and competence, and therefore, taller people tend to be considered better leaders. However, when looking at the initial example, although Nelson Mandela and Abraham Lincoln are tall, 6'1" and 6'4" respectively, Martin Luther King Jr. is not. King is 5'7", which is actually 2 inches shorter than the average height of men in the United States, which is 5'9", according to the CDC. This goes to show that like all other physical and psychosocial traits, similarities, although they indicate who is perceived as a leader, they do not indicate who is an effective leader or who will be a leader, as it often comes down to circumstance. Leaders tend to have similar psychosocial traits as well. There are 3 main traits that leaders have in common. They have high self-esteem, they are self-monitoring, and are outgoing. People with high self-esteem rate themselves as better leaders and have more confidence in their skills. This causes people around them to be reassured. Another trait of self-monitoring is Another trait is self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is the awareness of one's behavior and how it affects the people around them. This is found in leaders because it helps them understand the needs of the people they lead and how to adapt appropriately. Finally, since leadership is a social task, leaders are generally outgoing and extroverted. Leaders can also be very different. One main way that leaders differ is the type of power they exercise. There are 6 different types of power. The first is reward power. Reward power lies in the ability of the leader to reward the group. However, for it to be effective, the reward must be sufficient and desirable to the group. This can often be seen in work environments where salaries are considered to be the reward. The second type of power is coercive power. Coercive power is the ability to punish. Just as a reward must be big enough for the group, the punishment must also be feared enough by the group. Therefore, it must be a sufficient punishment. Throughout history, dictators have exercised this form of power. The third form of power is referent power. Referent power stems from the attraction of the group to the leader. This takes place because people are more likely to follow a leader they like in some way in an effort to please them. The fourth type of power is legitimate power. This type of power comes from a role that a leader has. This can be seen in the Stanford prison experiment, when civilians were placed into a role of security guard. The role they were placed in caused them to assume more power than they would normally have. The changes in their role caused a change in power they had. It is important to note that once a person is removed from the role, they lose the power they previously had. The fifth type of power is expert power. This type of power comes from someone having more knowledge in an area. People tend to feel that it is best to listen to such leaders because they know more about the task at hand. The final type of power is informational power. Informational power comes from the ability to decide who knows what. A prime example of this type of power is in North Korea, where citizens do not have access to as much information as we do, and may find certain aspects of their life to be normal, while we would consider it to be an injustice, and possibly fight against the leadership. Regardless of the differences in leadership and the power they have, it is important to note that power comes from the relationship between people, and in order for someone to be a leader, the followers must recognize the power that the leader has. Otherwise, they would neither have power nor be an effective leader. Now let's discuss how leaders make decisions.
My name is Raelynn Peyton, and I will be talking about leadership and decision making. There are 2 styles of leadership. Instrumental leadership focuses on achieving goals. An advantage of that would be that they make good managers because they get the job done. A disadvantage of that would be that they get so focused on one task they can alienate other group members, which in turn leaves group members out or reduces teamwork. The second style is expressive leadership, and they work to maintain friendly relationships and collective well-being of the group. An advantage of that would be that they make good bosses because they truly care about their employees. And when employees feel cared about, they are more motivated, willing to give extra effort, and be more involved. A disadvantage of that is that sometimes they lack efficiency and organizational skills. Most effective leaders have both styles. Both styles are needed for most effective leaders: expressive leadership and instrumental leadership. Most effective leaders have the ability to use the right style that best fits the situation. Effective leaders should have the ability to switch from instrumental and focusing on tasks to expressive and focusing on collaboration as needed. Characteristics of a good leader are adaptable and flexible in strategies, techniques, and methods, open to learning and changing their behavior. They learn from their mistakes of the past and accurately forecast the needs of the future. They have good communication skills, effective listening, and managing conflict, which contains 5 styles. First would be competing style. It's a style of managing conflict that represents a high concern for self but low concern for other parties. The second would be avoiding style, a style of managing conflict that represents low concern for both the self and the party. Third, accommodating style, a style of managing conflict that represents a high concern for the other party but low concern for self. Finally, compromising style, a style of managing conflict that represents a moderate concern for everybody's need and desires. There are three types of decision-making styles. Authoritarian decision-making, where the leader is sole person to make decisions. Advantages of that are they rule their groups, make all decisions, and give orders. It's beneficial when quick decisions needed in high-stress situations. The disadvantage would be it's often abused, limit creative thinking and initiative of other group members. The second is democratic. Members of the group take part in the decision-making. Advantages are trying to include everyone in the decision-making process through group discussion. They reach decisions through consensus. Generally, most popular members feel included, promote teamwork and creativity. Third, laissez-faire. It's hands-off, leaving team members in charge. An advantage of that is empowers employees, which can in turn help them become stronger in their position or role that they are playing. Can boost productivity overall, increase team innovation and morale. Disadvantage of that is some team members take advantage and let other members carry out heavier loads. Reduces cohesiveness of the group and lack of role awareness, which could leave group members confused on what their role actually entails.